Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hudson Institute panel on compensating creators in the new content ecosystem. My name is Devlin Hartline, and I'm legal fellow at the Hudson Institute's Forum for Intellectual Property. I'm thrilled to be here today with these expert panelists to discuss recent initiatives to ensure that creators are paid fairly for the use of their content. The digital age has brought many new opportunities for creators to connect with fans, but it has also presented many great challenges. Copyright owners have struggled to keep up with the vast amount of piracy online, and they have lacked the tools to enforce and license their rights effectively. Thankfully, many organizations have been working hard to solve the problems that have plagued rights owners, creators, and platforms. They are finding ways for creators to connect with fans while maintaining control over their works and being compensated for uses of their works. They're helping to make the promise of a new content ecosystem that respects the rights of creators and that helps them to make a living from their work a reality. To discuss these important tools for creators, we have four wonderful panelists with us today. We have Amadea Choplin, who is Chief Operating Officer at PECAS. We have Rodrigo Velloso, who is Global Director of Influencer Marketing at ROBLOX. We have Abe Batshon, who is Founder and Chief Executive Officer at BeatStars. And we have Meng Kuok, who is Co-Founder and Chief Executive Officer at BandLab Technologies. I'm excited to be chatting with them today. We'll start with opening remarks from each of the panelists, and they'll tell us about their organizations and what they're doing. And then we'll have a moderated discussion where we'll explore these topics more fully. And with that, I'll turn it over to Amadea.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amadea. I'm the COO at PECAS. We're a digital rights technology company. What we do is that we've built the infrastructure to connect platforms, creators, and rights holders in order to enable everyone to be able to understand what content is uploaded online and in order to monetize that content as effectively as possible in real time. So for platforms, it's incredibly hard to put in place all of the tools that they need to understand what is uploaded to their platforms, how to monetize it, who to attribute the content to, what to track, what to what data is important. And so we help them to put in place all of these tools and remain compliant with various laws across the world that have to do with copyright. So whether that's the DMCA in the US or the European Copyright Directive in Europe. So we take care of all of that for them so that they can focus on the heart of what they do and their community of creators. And then we let creators and more traditional rights holders like music labels, et cetera, upload all their content to PECAS for free, and then be able to track it and monetize it across all of the various platforms that exist online. So yeah, that's the heart of what we do at PECAS, and we're on a mission to make the copyright ecosystem more fair, more transparent, and enable the growth of really the creator economy.
All right, thank you so much. That's super interesting. Next, let's go to Rodrigo.
Thanks, Devlin. So I'm Rodrigo Velloso. I also go by Rod, and I work at ROBLOX. ROBLOX is a platform where folks develop, distribute, and monetize interactive content. So we have a community of creators that make interactive games, experiences that other folks that using the ROBLOX game engine, they can publish and share with other folks who can play those games. We also have a community of artists who are creating digital items and selling those items for other players to use on their avatars. And I specifically work with a group of influencers who are, more precisely named video creators who make content based on those interactive experiences, adding a lot of their own input and creative input as well. So very, very new space in terms of the content that's being created, where it's inspired, and the derivative works that are being created from that content, which is a fascinating topic in its own right, and where we face the typical challenges of the platform in helping all of these creators, new and old, manage their rights.
All right, thanks, Rod. I have to tell you, I told my boys that I had somebody from ROBLOX on a panel, and they were like, "Are you famous?" They were so excited to hear that. So I appreciate you being here. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Abe.
Thanks, Devlin. Yeah, I'm the founder and CEO of the pioneering music production licensing platform on the internet, BeatStars. So BeatStars, for those that don't know, is a music marketplace enabling millions of recording artists, songwriters to license music production from music producers, beat makers, DJs directly from the source, and allows them to create their derivative works from those licenses, which normally is a single or albums or any type of song that gets created from the platform that's then commercialized and distributed across the DSPs. And so we enable that relationship between those two communities, help generate over 8 million downloads on the platform every single year. So potentially 8 million different songs, original songs are created on the platform. We've been a part of so many successful music stories from amazing artists from all over the world, from Grammy award-winning artists to multi-platinum producers, and have been part of a lot of hit songs made on the platform. So I'm excited. Honestly, like I'm nervous sitting here with you guys, because you guys are like doing some of the most amazing shit in music and within the content industry. And what PECAS is doing is like absolutely nuts. And what Meng has done at BandLab, ridiculous. And Rodrigo, what you guys have done at ROBLOX, which basically just help babysit my kids while I'm able to work. Thank you, bro. I really appreciate that. But I'm honored to be here, and thanks for having me.
I second that on the babysitting the kids. So it's great to have you here, Abe. Meng, tell us about what you all are doing.
Yeah, likewise, I'm really happy to be here and obviously see friendly faces and people that we have great respect for. I've known Abe since 2016 was the first time we met out in New York, and been amazed by the stuff that he's done out at BeatStars, and obviously incredible stuff on PECAS and ROBLOX as well. So just honored to be here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of BandLab. Obviously within some of the other things I take care of as well. Some interesting things in the media space as well as the musical instrument space. But when it comes to BandLab, that's really our flagship platform. Easiest way to understand BandLab is it's sort of like Facebook for music, but with GarageBand, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, Patreon all built in. And the comparison between GarageBand and BandLab is sort of more like Microsoft Word to Google Docs, or Excel to Sheets, or Photoshop to Canva. So it's really it's not a replacement. It's very much a different paradigm where it's built around collaboration and around community, as well as the idea of a place where people can make music, can share music, and connect around everything in between. So for us, our vision is a world in which there are no barriers to make and share music, and in some ways we've been excited by some of the growth that we've seen over the couple of years. I think when I first met Abe, we just launched into beta. We had a couple of thousand users. Today we have more than 40 million users across the world on our platform, more than 13 million songs being made a month right now on BandLab, through the platform, which is just insane when you think about it, and kind of scary. But the reality is, when you put the power of music making into people's hands in the very first instrument they have, which is that mobile first. The mobile phone is their very first instrument. It's extremely exciting what you can do and empower around the world. So although our vision is a world in which, we see no barriers to people making and sharing music, although, on the one hand, that may sound like something that's sort of contrary to the sort of some of the topics that we're talking about today. Actually, on the contrary to that, we feel that if someone isn't being paid fairly for their music, that's actually a massive barrier in people making music, because that's actually stopping them from getting compensated fairly. It's stopping them from being able to dedicate their time. And so that's a huge thing we care about. And I think in some ways, all of us on this call, we're uniquely positioned, especially the stuff that Abe is doing at BeatStars, because we're sort of really working with creators day to day. Our focus is not really on consumption as much as on creation. And in that sense, that's where really supporting creators and protecting their rights is a core premise for us. And it's not against the fundamental engagement with our platform. It's our value proposition is around something else and around supporting their livelihoods. And therefore we're very much front and center of how to support creators getting paid fairly. And I think the fact that we're all on this call together, it's about collaboration as well, not just between users but also between companies. So very happy to be here and pleased to be on this call with you guys.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Meng. That's super interesting. So I want to give you guys a chance to respond.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Abe.
BandLab is a silent giant. BandLab is a silent. The game does not give BandLab enough credit for how many songs and artists are developing their craft. Like, absolutely nuts. Like, I'm so happy that Meng is on here. I'm so happy because I saw it, man. I saw it early on, and I was like, "Geez, this is about to change the game."
Well, we're all excited that everybody's here. Thanks so much, guys. So I want to start asking you some questions so we can dig in a little bit here. And I'm wondering, what do you think is the biggest copyright hurdle that's facing content creators, platforms, and right owners today?
Can I jump in?
Yeah, Abe,
you guys not going to shut me up, that's for sure. But let me tell you, so there's so much derivative works, right? There's so many pieces of original content, especially on the BeatStars side. When you talk about a beat that's sold non-exclusively to potentially thousands of different artists creating multiple licensed master recordings with the same music production. And so this has been a concept that's been going on forever. And so a lot of the, you would say, like the social music platforms or social platforms, the Instagrams, the Facebooks, the YouTubes, you name it, really operate on a one master model. Really only operate on a one master model, when our creators make their bread and butter licensing music non-exclusives and then creating these new masters from that same composition. And so there is a ton of money that our community as music producers are being completely ignored and are not able to even figure out ways to allocate that money, because all of these services are only operating on a one master kind of model, where it doesn't recognize that this piece of work can actually be used across multiple different commercial releases. And so that's been our biggest hurdle, I think, from a perspective of helping our copyright owners get the money that they're deserved, is that the massive tech platforms need to conform and need to understand how music is being made in today's world. And I'm sure Meng can attest to this too, because the same music production is being used by millions of artists on BandLab. And so, but they all legally have rights to be able to kind of use that work and put it up on these social platforms. But the original music producer, unfortunately, gets kind of screwed and gets kind of left out of the equation when it comes time for royalties to be paid on copyright. So that's kind of like our biggest challenge, and that's what's so exciting about working with PECAS and learning about how they're able to help facilitate that with their attribution engine is going to be exciting.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I would say so. Some of the interesting insights, I think, for us, the copyright hurdle, I think obviously we're seeing very interesting tailwinds in the industry with TikTok and short form video, as well as what that's doing for the music industry, as well as obviously streaming revenues and the music industry growing as a whole again. When we think about the copyright hodl, we also think about the larger trends. And one of the interesting things on a platform like BandLab, because we're so close to source, we're so far upstream, in people sort of picking up music for the very first time and then getting inspired and starting to make music. I would say one of the biggest challenges, facing content creators, platforms, and rights owners is actually the general divide as well between people who care about it and people who don't, right? And I just to elaborate on the latter point, I think we all, on this call care about it clearly, in terms of, our association with artists and creators who do care about it and understand the value of it. The flip side is there is a huge population, actually the majority, that most of the people of us on this call today, we all remember paying for music. The reality is for the entire generation below us and everyone below that, many of them have never paid for music in their life before. And therefore, if you haven't paid for something, understanding that you would be paid for it if you created that content is a foreign concept to many, many users, especially when you start thinking about that on a global perspective. So I think, a lot of that comes from education. A lot of that also comes from some people just, it's part of it is the natural transition of music becoming, not being a product anymore, but becoming a service. And I think, the one master, system that Abe was talking about is a system of, built on the institution of where music used to be a product, right? And once you turn it into a service and the creation of music as a service, and when the artist and the creator is really the product, then how do you support that? That comes through education. It comes through platforms, actually supporting other platforms and businesses like what PECAS is doing, supporting, end user platforms like ours to be able to support our creators, both in, our responsibilities to help to educate as well as to create the features and to support them. But we also need support in the tools because there is a lot of complexity and to support sort of the larger ecosystem and the industry as a whole, there does require, specialists and platforms that are dedicated to supporting the users who do care about it. And then hopefully onboarding that larger funnel and helping, other users down that path, because nothing, and I think, I see Abe's tweets about, users shouting about their receipts and their earnings from BeatStars. And it's so inspiring and amazing to see, sort of that kind of support that they're giving to the creator economy and artists out there. We see this as well. We recently acquired a business called Reverb Nation. Some of you guys will have, been aware of this. In our lifespan, we've paid out, tens of millions of dollars to artists in royalties, through distribution revenues and e-commerce revenues through the site as well. And that feeling of helping people and getting more people into a place where they're actually earning a living or earning part of a living through what they do in their love for music and creativity is really special. So, education, collaboration again, and the platforms building services to support end user platforms, but also, one of the biggest hurdles is just whether people care or not. And I think that's a scary thing for us all to think about, but it's also the reality and the insight that we have.
Yeah, I totally agree with Meng and Abe. I think like at the crux of it, it's really an issue of knowledge and control. So like for all the independent artists out there, it's like once you put out what you created, whether that's, like a beat or a choreography or a video, like whatever it is, it could be music, but I think there's so many types of creators out there. And all of it is copyrightable, right? And like all these creators, they're rights holders, and that's like a fundamental part of the vocabulary that for some reason there's a disparity in the words that we use, but really it's all creation, it's all art, it's all beauty, and that's what keeps us alive, right? So I think all of that needs to once that work is out there, the person who created it loses all control of it. It's like, oh, well, I put it out on this platform, and then, oh, I randomly learned that it was on some other platform by someone else. And really it's like, okay, how do you reclaim control and knowledge over where your work is, in order to just better understand everything, better understand your fans, better understand who loves your stuff, why they're using it, what are they doing with it? Is it funny? Is it cool? Like, what is it? And then, finally being able to monetize it is obviously like just a huge part of the system, right? But on the platform side too, it's such a challenge to do that, right? Like you have a user, they uploaded something. How do you even know, who created it originally? How do you attribute it? And then how do you compensate it if it's like a video that has so many parts to it, so many different creators that are, mixed up into it. So all of these are really, really complex problems. But at the end, it all boils down to that knowledge and that control over it. And we have the tools now, right? So there's no excuse to kind of not have it be a reality for all these, for all these creators, all these rights holders, and for the platforms to be finally able to put it in place, because it is super hard, super complex. We spent years building it, right? And so no one's saying it's easy, but it has to happen, especially in this kind of new economy that we're seeing, where more and more people want to be making their life around this notion of creation. So I think it's really fundamental to get there and get there quick.
Yeah, I hope Rob doesn't mind me jumping in just in response to that sort of immediately. I think one of the biggest challenges as well is music. When you touch on creativity and art and beauty, making music is a creative thing. It's a beautiful thing that ultimately you don't want to sit down and sort of write out contracts and sort of figure out those things from the get-go. That actually sometimes would inhibit the creativity because you're distracted. And I think most people don't think about it that way. And I think one of the biggest changes in the world of social media and UGC is this idea that not everyone again goes out there and aspires that their music is going to turn over millions of dollars in royalties or revenue that they could collect from people around the world. The reality is, a lot of the time now it happens by accident, right? And the happy accidents, if they shared something and it went viral, that is a story that is as old as time now, that people didn't expect something to be as big a hit as it is. And I think that happens even more so today when people think of music as something they do for fun and they can share something as much as they want. And the system isn't really built for this. So I think it is the responsibilities of the platform. A lot of platforms, I would say, take a reactive approach. And, part of the reason, we've been chatting a lot with what the guys are doing at PECAS and very amazed and excited by what they're doing is I think platforms also need to take a proactive approach, because just because someone doesn't care doesn't mean you don't need to support them, and having that as a baseline so that the minute they do realize that it is important to them, you need to be there to be, to catch them and support them and make sure that infrastructure was already there to support, them at a different level of maturity. One of the questions people ask a lot is, when you collaborate on BandLab, how do you manage copyright, and how do you sort of like assign, if we all collaborated on a live session right now, the flip side is if we all walked into a room and walked out in the traditional world, there'll be no record whatsoever of what we did, right? And actually the old, adage of give a word, get a third, that becomes, because it's so difficult to document someone's contribution. And it's always going to be difficult into perpetuity, but at least with something that's sort of cloud-based with a version control and a version history, at least you actually have a record of who did what and when. So if someone really does want to argue like, hey, I didn't contribute this, that doesn't mean, we sit down and we split everything in terms of you did bass and you're worth, 50%. This will please the bassist, and then the guitar soloist, only gets 10%. The reality is obviously it's still up to the rights holders and the creators, but platforms need to support them with the tools as a baseline, even if they don't think it's important for them at that point in time when they're being creative and inspired by something.
And I think that the challenge in doing that, and I'm glad you jumped in, Meng, is that the biggest hurdle per the question is the law. Right? The law is really old and outdated. It's 1923, right? The copyright law in the US is largely based on Disney, right? The cutoff date is the Mickey Mouse cutoff date. So we're talking about like early animation, primordial animation based on drawings. I'm dealing in a world today where games are animation engines for video content that's that has voiceovers, that has a picture-in-picture talking heads, people commenting, that's scripted or unscripted. That so I'd say the biggest hurdle is that we operate based on an old law, and we operate based on an enforcement tradition that is largely originating from large copyright holders. And then what Meng and Abe and Amadea are all saying, which I fully agree with, is like we're now living in a world of small creators and small copyright holders who are making smaller and smaller pieces of a creation, right? And where I come from, we have the saying that's this: nothing is created, everything is copied. And so actually, like, you know, people draw inspiration from, and what is the level of, you know, originality of anything, and then how do you determine, you know, per Meng, what is everybody's cut of these new things that are coming up that are so intertwined, because they're created almost faster than anybody can ask permission, than anybody can, you know, and then the problem of dividing those rights only becomes a problem when the thing is already successful and you haven't pre-negotiated any of that, right? So there's only been really one attempt, I think, that I'm aware of, at least one significant attempt to redesign copyright law, which was the Creative Commons, but hasn't unfortunately reached a level of you know, and to me, that's where the hiccups always come, right? Like DMCA is an awful law. It's a good attempt at like bringing copyright. It's an attempt, not a good attempt, an attempt at bringing copyright law into the 21st century. But it was the only attempt, and it's a terrible a system in terms of how it's actually implemented. It completely disincentivizes platforms to do what Meng is saying. Like you have to take the opposite perspective. It's like, nope, the copyright holder has to do the heavy lifting here. And how do you even like prove that? So, you know, and where's I think the dividing is the hardest part, right? The law never anticipated creation happening in the way that it's happening today, per Abe, per Meng, like where lots of folks are, you know, informally collaborating to create something that eventually becomes viral or popular.
Devlin, so it's decided you're rewriting it all, and we'll rely on you to save us all.
Well, you know, reforming the DMCA is actually at the top of my list of important things, and so I have yet to meet a creator that says the DMCA is working well, right? It's always the service providers who say, oh, it works fine. You just send takedown notices and we'll take it down. And, you know, that isn't the way it was supposed to work. And so there are a lot of good people working behind the scenes on changing it, but as you can imagine, it just takes a long time and there's going to be a lot of opposition. So, all right, wow, you guys are really talkative. This is great.
No, everyone hates takedowns, right? Like there's no part of the industry that benefits from takedowns. Like creators hate takedown, platforms want more content, not less, and rights holders really just want to monetize, right? So takedowns don't work for anyone, and that's kind of the only power that you get through the DMCA. I think the one like cool initiative that we've had lately is the European Copyright Directive. And I think the prism that it changes, well, there's quite a few things in that law, but I think one of the things that is a pretty fundamental break from traditionally the DMCA model, which basically was mimicked in Europe too, with the e-commerce directive. So the premise that changes is the notion of best effort. And so we switch from a model where essentially your biggest incentive was to get to a lawsuit, essentially, to a notion where everyone needs to do best effort to get to a contract. And you know, that could take many forms. It could be like an instant monetization type of model, but it could be, you know, like a blanket license or whatever it is, you know. So I think there's room for different kinds of monetization models, but the whole incentive is, hey, the value creation is there, get to the table in order to find a way to share it. And
Amadea, guess what? Like our producers deal with that same challenge, right? The same challenge of their content being commercially released without it even being cleared. And sometimes it's the major labels doing it.
I mean,
so you know what I'm saying? So there is already like, you know, there's already like a huge flaw in the system regarding how to make sure, you know, the original copyright creators are, you know, are being looked at before anything is released commercially. You know what I mean? So it's like there's still a huge challenge there.
So many. Yeah, there's you know, like creators, there's like rights holder to creator, like majors, indies, platforms, and rights holders, right? Like there's so many parts to the system. And then there's also like you and me, right? You and me uploading our like wedding video with music in the background and all of those things of being like unintentional creators, I guess, in a sense. So like all of those things come into the equation. It's incredibly hard to get everyone around the table. I just think that notion of like, hey, we all have to actually be around the table and try to make this work rather than we have to get to litigation is like a definite step forward in the way.
Do you feel like the distributors have a responsibility as well too, in part of this? You feel like they should have a bigger role?
Yeah, absolutely. I think distributors, well, firstly, I think distributors can be huge. And by distributors, you mean like platforms like yourself? Abe?
Yeah, like me, TuneCore, DistroKid, any distributor. Yep, that releases commercially.
Totally. Like I think there's and I think actually distributors are one of the parties that was totally overlooked from the EU copyright kind of stakeholder conversation. Like you had all the majors, you had the kind of Creative Commons community, you had the platforms at the table, you had us, but the distributors were just nowhere to be seen. I don't know what happened there. But I think you have a huge part both in advocating for the creators on your platforms, and that's super important. And the challenges of your communities are definitely like a little bit different or a lot different from people who are represented by the major labels and such. And I think there's also probably a responsibility to make sure that that the conversations are had between like that the content that's put out by the distributors is essentially like properly attributed to, right? Like if I'm trying to put out Adele's music on via a distributors, I think there's some accountability there to be had. And I think we play a part in that.
Yeah. This is a commercial for PECAS right now.
Thanks, Abe.
Oh, that's great. So let's change gears just a little bit, and can you all talk about what are some proactive ways that platforms can help creators and rights owners to control their content? What can platforms be doing?
So I actually, before ROBLOX, I worked at YouTube, which I think is one of the platforms that is perhaps most kind of done to help folks identify their content, right, through Content ID, which is like an Emmy award-winning, but I think it's important. It's an important example in the industry because we're talking about a tool that costs billions and billions of dollars to develop over 10 years, and that's still kind of, how do you say, like frowned upon to a large extent by the industry because of, because it, really kind of applies kind of one rule to everything, and it's very inflexible. But it's the face of the law. The law is that inflexible monster. And so I thought there were some very interesting examples, while at YouTube of how that played out. So in the music space, for example, so many different rights to consider, right? The sync rights, the mechanical rights, the publishing rights, the performance rights, and so forth and so on. So, we wanted to do something simple, which was, how do you compensate cover song performers, right? Just to solve like that one case of one very common case for that platform, but for the industry is, was so challenging. There was no foundation to do any of that. Like, what is the split? Where we ended up, we'll do a third for each, like a third for the rights holder, a third for the cover artist, a third for the platform, because there's no other guidance. And then we have to go out and get everybody to accept that, because that's not the law. So like, you want in on this system that works this way, you've got to accept the rules of this system. And then you still have to build the tool, the melody ID, right, to identify the melody of the song, even when it's not its original performance. So you're not an identical copy. You know, you have thresholds of similarity and so forth to deal with at, you know, a technological level. So, I mean, I guess the point is, you know, it's so challenging from the perspective of you know, anybody involved in the industry, because there's zero agreement as to what the level of, you know, what the splits should be, what the and then, you know, just to add complexity to the example, so that's like, that system, Content ID, was largely developed based on the music industry, which was the most kind of, you know, active around its copyrights, and major lawsuits and so forth and so on. It simply doesn't work for gaming. It's barely applied for gaming. In fact, it caused huge issues in early, you know, in 2013. I was the head of gaming at YouTube, and we had a massive issue when our Content ID tool was kind of unleashed over the content of all these gamers that had previously been protected by you know, MCNs and channel networks that were kind of immune to Content ID. And all of a sudden, you have like all these claims coming on all these gaming videos from Nintendo soundtracks and other gaming soundtracks that, you know, and all the game publishers coming to us and saying, why are my gamers being struck down, you know, and then we find out it's like the provider that they license the music to sell the music on iTunes is striking down the gaming videos that they think are fundamental to their marketing. And it's so, you know, it's so many interested parties for so many different purposes. Like, without kind of that categorization of what are all of these use cases, and like there cannot be a monolithic kind of approach to you know, licensing and rights and monetization anymore.
Yeah, I totally agree, Rod. It's really not an easy problem. So, you know, it keeps it fun for us every day. But I think what we're trying to do, right, is make it not like a multi-billion-dollar endeavor for platforms to put in place, like at least the foundations of something like that, right? And maybe beyond also what Content ID is doing in certain regards, and going further than Content ID has gone, because maybe also the incentives here are a little bit different. But I think what we want is, you know, a world in which platforms can put in place these solutions, but even at their inception, right? Like in their at the very beginning of their life, so that they're built on the right infrastructure to be able to put in place these splits and these monetization rules. And maybe at the beginning, honestly, it's just track, right? And then as they grow and they're able to monetize more, it's sharing that revenue. And so putting in place all of these tools is really important. And I think you touched upon, like, I think what's really so fundamental is making sure that it's not that not only one type of rights holders is recognized, right? Like you have to put in place the tools that help all the independent creators be able to be a full part of this system, and be fully recognized, because that's just the world we live in right now. There's no superiority from one or the other. Everyone can go viral, everyone can make a hit, and that should be recognized and compensated from the get-go.
You know what also is a really big challenge to me too? I don't think too many people are thinking about it or talking about it. It's the royalty-free melodies, samples that are being used across huge releases, as well as so many independent releases as well too, in how to manage the rights holder flow on that type of content. I think is still going to be very, very challenging too.
Exactly. I echo that. We have BandLab Sounds, which is, royalty-free samples, loops, one-shots, and have huge amounts of people using that on a monthly basis and creating music with that, as well as then sort of, developing out further in the various DAWs of choice, even if they don't use BandLab as their primary one. It's a huge challenge. We have artists who get their stuff sort of flagged because someone else has uploaded it to YouTube, and therefore it's flagged on Content ID and a sample or a looped where it was very much, legally obtained and we commissioned ourselves, or we developed, it's a proprietary sound pack from BandLab. This creates challenges for artists. So I think, there needs to be, platforms that are looking at how to help solve these issues, into the proactive ways that the platforms can sort of help the creators and rights holders. I think obviously, what PECAS is doing in creating platforms that allow platforms to be proactive about it. Actually, instead of there being no solutions and the only solution is to be reactive, I think, we need solutions that are cost effective, that allow platforms who care about these things to be proactive. On the flip side, I think what Abe is doing with BeatStars, you need to give creators and rights holders actually an incentive to want to control their content. I'm coming from the point of view where many of them don't see a value, but if they can actually see that, hey, I can actually license my music, out to artists, I can, not only get a hit, but I can actually earn from the beats that I made as a producer. If you show them the incentives, that's part of the education itself, right? You've got to sort of dangle the value proposition of why I care about controlling my content, and actually putting it front and center. You need to see what the carrot is, and I think that's where platforms need to create those incentives, and that's what stuff like guys like BeatStars are doing. But at the flip side, platforms need to be supported by other services that make it possible to be proactive. Otherwise, it becomes impossible to do so.
Yeah. Yep. And by the way, Meng, I'm not knocking royalty-free sounds at all. I think it's just such a huge inspiration starter for so many amazing pieces of music. Like, it needs to be available. Those starting points need to be available, especially for like the novice creator, the novice music producer that is still developing and learning how to make music digitally with their digital instrument, like you said, your phone, right? So yeah, I mean, I think it can be done. There's some people on this call that can make it happen, I think.
I think the technical way where you're solving this is by having those royalty-free like either samples or whatever it is, sounds be part of the registry, and then like a system of license keys essentially where creators can say, no, like I do have a license for this, right? But I'm not saying it's easy again, but that's I think the way to solve it. I think they're like a huge part of the creator ecosystem right now. I think they make music creation super compelling. I think it's an awesome tool for everyone creating content out there. So we're definitely like looking at all the ways in which we can support that and not have stupid takedowns on it later on, for sure.
Great. So let's change gears a little bit and talk about the loss of control. So a loss of control often means that creators and rights owners, they have no insight into how or when their content is being used or shared online. And I'm wondering, have you seen this lack of control and insight? How has it impacted creators and rights owners directly? What's your experience there?
Abe, you have to talk about Beat ID.
Is that my plug? Is that my part? Okay.
That's the layout.
I mean, yeah, we have an amazing partnership with PECAS, and we just released a tool called Beat ID, powered by our friends over at PECAS, that allow our original content creators on BeatStars to go and start tracking and monitoring all of the different uses of their copyrights. And so it's the kind of like, honestly, this is the first time it's ever been done for the end consumer, for the end creator. This is, I think, first time introduced to the world. And so now our creators, because they're releasing so many non-exclusive licenses, so many free downloads, so many uses of their works, they have no clue on what side of the earth and planet and the interwebs their content even, exists. And we've found some, we found some scenarios where, hit songs and like #1 songs in China, #1 songs in like France and all over the world are being used, or in Vietnam and all over the world, they're being used with beats on BeatStars that are like topping all these charts, and our producers have no clue. Like literally no clue that they had these like massive songs in these different territories. And as we move to this more global creator community, and as we come closer and collaborators are happening, I mean, the biggest collaboration story on BeatStars is Old Town Road, right? Music producer from a village in the Netherlands collaborating with an artist in Atlanta, Georgia. We all know the story, right? It happened on BeatStars. And it's so, but it's like, how many of those more inter-territory collaborations that we're being missed out on, that we're really not able to identify until those, like Meng said, a beautiful human story, of creators, and regardless of where they're from, regardless of what race, religion, territory, to make music history together, man, this is amazing. But it needs, those stories need to continue to be told, because the music producer in Germany needs to be able to go to Singapore and know exactly who he's collaborating with, or she's writing songs for. And those type of relationships and those type of experiments in music, I mean, music is all experimental. And if you increase the probability of more experiments, what are we going to have? Anomalies all day long, which is already starting to happen. It's already starting to happen on the internet every single day. Every single day there's a TikTok hit that was made on BeatStars. Like every day there's a new TikTok trend or sound or dance or song that was made on our platform that's powering those platforms. So it's like, now it's time to kind of bring that appreciation for each other as creators, bring a solution that's fair, bring a solution that allows them to control, unauthorized uses of those copyrights as well too. Be able to, as a music producer, say, okay, that beat was stolen, that shouldn't be up there. Sure, maybe this label put it out, or this artist put it out, but they don't have a proper license for my works. I need to be able to have that conversation at least. You know what I mean? Like, I need to be able to have the I need to know about the conversation. I need to know about my living wages that are being hidden from me and being kind of like not available to me just because of access, just because of, honestly, just a little bit of not a little bit. I'm not to say PECAS is a little bit of technology, but it's a technology that is already available. It's already available. And so we felt like it was super essential, as we are already in the business of molding young entrepreneurs, handling their own business, handling their own. We don't really need everyone else dictating and telling us how our copyrights are used, how our music is utilized across platforms. We need to be able to give them the power, at least, to say, hey, hey YouTube, please, can you take that down? That person doesn't have a license. Can I at least just have the conversation, and it's only right. Like, it's only right. It's their work. It's their music. And so we're so like happy that we're putting power and data, with our friends from PECS, and like putting it back into the creators' hands to control like how their art is utilized and presented across the world. It needs to happen.
But is it practical, I think, is the question, Abe, because like, from my perspective, that's one of the biggest challenges too, like control versus monetization.
Listen, right? we're only visualizing data, Rodrigo. So we're only visualizing data, right? So the creator, the original copyright owner, has the decision to make what they want to do, right? They have the legal right to decide what they want to do with their intellectual property, right? So we just need to.
That's exactly the question, right? Like, is that right practical? Right, from the perspective of market, right, of collaboration, of the speed at which things need to happen for success to happen, and then for there even to be a pie to split, right? Like, we would see this often. In addition to YouTube, I worked at a company called Redbubble, which was print-on-demand consumer products. right? So folks, things would happen in the world. Let's say you'd have like a Star Wars movie came out, or, a politician said something interesting in Congress. And that event, right? The time during which that thing was in the public eye in a way that made it commercially viable is limited, right? The attention span is limited. It lasts 4 to 6 weeks. A major movie release lasts 6 weeks. Like a big political scandal lasts 2. Like you can check this stuff on Google Trends. You don't need to take my word for it. You can see how long those events last. So if you're quick to market and you say, hey, I made this, it's based on this, it's a derivative, you can make a lot of money and you can share that money. And that's one question. But if you want control over the way that's used and you want to say, well, actually, I want to say if I like this use or I don't like it, like I want to actually influence message, I want to influence content, not monetization as a separate question. That's much, much more challenging because then that requires input prior to the creation and release versus, okay, we had this big success, how do we split it, right? Some things can take place after the fact.
That is kind of happening. Our license agreements cover that. Our license agreements cover that. It's tough. Yeah, it's a tough challenge, man, to prove it across all cases for sure. It's really tough.
Exactly. I think the point about the reality of the global situation as well, like Abe was saying, things that are blowing up in different countries, as we move out of the world of broadcasting and narrowcasting and everyone being able to sort of really self-serve, just look at the charts, right? Spotify's end of year Wrapped versus Apple Music's end of year Wrapped, and you look at the charts, they're completely different, right? Because of the regional aspects of where they're based, and these are the major platforms. So think about the smaller use cases once you get into gaming, once you get into metaverse or specific people's rooms in various places. Having complete control or visibility is just realistically impractical because of the different jurisdictions in which you're also operating. So I think that's definitely one of the biggest challenges. And to the question of whether it's practical or whether it's solvable, I mean, I still think there should be best efforts by platforms to try and build some kind of standard, because otherwise you'll never get there, right? But I think that's a big challenge, and maybe it'll take many years for us to get there. Maybe it'll be much faster with various services that could be widely adopted. And I think that's very important for platforms, at least again, to try, but it is the responsibility of the consumption services at scale and trying to get everybody involved. And it also requires different jurisdictions and laws in different places. Obviously in Europe now it's becoming much more important, which is different to various other countries in the world that may not see that as a priority because they want to spur innovation in different ways. But how does this lack of control, impact creators and rights owners? I speak for Abe because of the creators we have as well on the platform. On BandLab, many of them buy their beats from BeatStars, and BandLab is what they use to actually rap on top of them and then release them. Whether it's through BeatStars or they, through BandLab distribution or ReverbNation distribution. What is what does lack of control and or even the possibility to monetize or the visibility affect? It might mean someone who's incredibly talented giving up music without realizing they're a star, right? And I think that's a horrible thing when you think about it, that somebody, the lack of control impacting creators was not just about sort of putting money in their pocket, but actually keeping them creative or seeing that sort of personal reward and success, even if they didn't get a cent for it. The fact that they were being validated for the time they put in their heart and soul and sweat and blood and tears into creating something magical and creative, that's desperate, right? And if you lose just one of them, it's painful and damaging. Just imagine at the scale that's happening out there in the world today of people, who are creating amazing content and just not even realizing, and then they're going home and giving up when they really should be, doubling down.
Yeah, Meg and Rodrigo, I couldn't agree more. Like, I think to go back to what you were saying, Rodrigo, I think there's there's data and then there's actionable data, and actionable data is a lot more interesting than just raw data. Because and now what, right? Like that's the important part. And I think like monetization is like one super important key to that. I think it's why, 5 years ago, I went from working at a platform that was maybe solving that idea of like access to an audience, but not like, okay, and then what do I do once I have that audience? Like there was no answer to that, to like create PECs and what we're doing right now. So I'm fully committed to finding all of those outcomes. And I think so direct monetization is key. Understanding your fans, like do you have like huge audience as a beat producer in Russia because like someone uploaded stuff to VK and like, you know, like all of those things, they all like, do you know what beat is most successful? You know, like you might think it's this one, but really it's this one. So like understanding all of that, I think that's all actionable data. So I think there's a lot of parts to it. It might be just like discovering this whole new audience that then, you know, then you can go to a label to like with and better sell, you know, your music or you know, another type of creative skill, right? So I really think it's like we're at this moment in time where we can be super creative too, right? Like NFTs, whatever it is, right? Like there's so many ways to empower creators, independents, artists, that, you know, the actions are endless, but you've got to start with knowledge.
Yeah, I think Eric, sorry, go ahead, sorry. Yeah.
And I just wanted to reiterate, I think it like going back, I think there is a choice to be made, right? I think like having our cake and eating it too is no longer possible. Like you can have control or you can have monetization or you can have insights, right? I think that's the challenge. Like we want, like copyright holders or creators want still the everything that the original law promised, whereas the world I think doesn't accommodate that anymore, right? So you have to choose. You know, and I'll give the example of ourselves, you know, at ROBLOX, kind of, you know, the program I work at, which is a massive amount of video being published to YouTube based on ROBLOX games. It's 10 billion views a month. It's 70,000 videos. We cannot monitor all of that. We cannot control the message and what's being said. And so we can be reactive about, you know, the creators that we work with and making sure that over time we hone and say, oh, these folks are more aligned with our message and with our, and we can provide them with guidelines and over time hone that in. But trying to, you know, ahead of time, align, have control over the content or who is creating it, importantly, especially in politically charged times, that's become relevant as well. Like, I don't want my content to be, you know, modified in this or that way, or I don't want my content to be modified in this or that way by this or that type of person. That level of control, that's going to cost you monetization. That's going to cost you intelligence in this day and age. And that's where you know, it becomes challenging for holders to accept.
You know what?
Yeah,
I want to bring up some good news, Meng. I want to bring up some happy news. Can I bring up some happy news? I want to bring up some happy news. There's what we just did with Beat ID and our integration also with Sony Music Publishing on the music publishing side to administer to give publishing administration services to the global BeatStars community. Now, as a producer who I know I'm the original creator of that music production, and I have these licenses that have been sold on BeatStars, and I have copies of all my agreements. I know what my publishing splits are. I know everything, right? We're able now to, you know, locate all of these songs and these derivative works that were created from the beats that were licensed on the platform, where that, you know, that producer never knew existed and probably never registered those songs and have them be administered by publishing. So we solved that a little bit. You know, I think that was something that, you know, hasn't really, you know, existed, and it's a piece, right? It's a piece. It's the ability to at least, you know, from a songwriter and music producer perspective, you know, my publishing royalties, yeah, maybe they're not the biggest source of all the revenue that's happening out there, but at least, you know, it's available to me now, you know, even though, you know, hopefully we can help, you know, producers and songwriters earn more on commercial platforms. But yeah, I mean, there's some happy news today. I think that's you know, that's something that was solved, and I think we're moving in the right direction, you know.
And I think you're part of moving the right direction. I'm 100% in the same camp of like, there is an optimization exercise or a balance that needs to be found between control and monetization. You can't have it all there. But I do feel actually strongly that data is actually something you can have and everybody can be committed to and committed to trying to understand, because without data, you won't actually be able to create any decent legislation on control or monetization and what optimizes for the users, because you wouldn't necessarily know where these things are going and what. So I would say that's actually the fundamental ingredient, but it's not even part of the same equation as to the balance of control and monetization. Data is something, I think at least visibility and understanding of what's going on is something that is hopefully possible, and it's something that people can be committed to. How that results in control and monetization, those are for smarter gods than me to be able to sort of make sense of, and obviously it also depends on the user very much as to whether they want control or whether they prefer to monetize and deal with things after the fact. It's going to differ all around the world in different circumstances. Exactly as Rod says, I think in today's environment, you don't want it used in a Let's Go Brandon song. You don't want it used by this politician in their sort of in the rallies and played as a preview. The usage is now really contextual, right? Words and language is contextual today, and music even more so. So I think some of these things are frankly impossible problems, but at very, very least, trying to understand it with data is the baseline of what we can do. Whether we'll all be happy with the solution, I that one I can't guarantee, but I think we're all in the right direction if we're committed to understanding our audience and where things happen more, because that will make us hopefully make better decisions as we try and balance that challenging route between the two, right?
That's great, guys, and I hate to say it, but we're at the end of the hour, and I could listen to you all talk all day long, and you've actually given me great hope that there are wonderful people like yourselves who are thinking about these important issues. And I have more hope now than I did an hour ago that we'll have a future where creators and rights owners will have control over their content and be able to make money from their content, perhaps no matter how it's being distributed. I think it's an important problem, and I'm super thankful that you guys were here to talk about it. And I really appreciate you taking an hour out of your day. And to Meng, I know it's like 2 o'clock in the morning in Singapore.
I couldn't tell he was live.
And I really appreciate you guys joining us. And it's been a great conversation. And I just wanted to say thank you. And I look forward to, hopefully I'll get to work with you guys again.
Appreciate you guys. Much love. Much love.
Thank you.
Likewise.